In this presentation, we're going to start our bank reconciliation for the first month of operations, entering the deposits or reconciling the deposits for month 1 for January. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Online. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars file. Let's start off by opening up our report. So I'm going to go to the report down below. We're going to be taking a look at the balance sheet report because we will be focusing in, of course, on cash. So I'm going to go up top and change the dates. We're just going to look at the first month. So 01/01/20 to 01/31/20. So January 1st to January 31st, 2020. Let's go ahead and run that report. Then I'm going to go up top to the tab up top, right click on it, duplicate that tab. Now let's hold down Control. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit to that 125. I'm going to hold it, close the hamburger. So here's the checking account. Here's our checking account. Now the process for the bank reconciliation is you want to get the bank statement, not a transcript of the bank's account for a certain time period, but the actual bank statement that has the beginning and ending numbers. So this is what this is a mock bank statement that we have here. So we have the bank statement for the end of January. We got the beginning number that was the ending number of the prior month, beginning number this month, 25,000. Then we have the additions, deposits. Then we have the decreases, which are going to be the checks and other decreases. Then we have the ending balance. This ending balance, you would hope, ties in. Does this tie into our report? If we go back to our report, no, it doesn't. Why wouldn't it? It's as of the same date as of January 31st. Because there's outstanding deposits and outstanding checks, and probably because there's stuff that cleared the bank which we didn't enter. We probably made a problem. And maybe the bank made a problem. Probably not. We probably have some things maybe that we spent on that didn't get into our bookkeeping system. That's why. Let's fix it. Okay, so here's the balance. How are we going to do it? We're going to go then to the first tab then. I'm going to hold down Control and scroll back down. And we're going to go to the reconciling item. The reconciling is going to be in the accounting tab on the bottom. Now, I've already gone into this, so your screen might look a little bit different, but we're going to be reconciling. You're going to choose to reconcile, and you want to reconcile the checking account, which is the first account. That's going to be the normal reconciliation that'll be showing up by default. I'm going to resume the reconciliation because, once again, I've already kind of looked at it a bit, so it'll already have some information in it. So, but the next screen that you're going to see is if I go to edit up top, it's going to be something like this. You're going to have the beginning balance, which will be there by default. Notice you cannot change the beginning balance because it was in there it was the ending balance of the last period. This is the first reconciliation we did. How did that number get there? Because we put it in the opening balance section. We put it in as of the opening balance. Now, the first bank reconciliation, you might have a problem that number doesn't tie into what's on your bank statement, or you might have just zero there and nothing on your bank statement. One way around that is to just enter the beginning balance into the register, right? Just like we did here when we entered this beginning balance. We put the other side, we increased checking account, we put the other side to equity, or we put it to, or we put it to the prior year that rolled into equity. So you could do the same thing instead of using the beginning balance. For example, if this is 0, I got to do what I got to do to reconcile in the first time period. So what you would do then is just enter as of the last year, or you can enter it this year as long as you make sure you hit equity and not an income statement account, the 25,000. In that case, you'll have a 0 here, but it'll reconcile if you just check it off as we go to the reconciliation process, which we'll be seeing in the next screen. So that's one issue you could have, and just be aware that's kind of the workaround. Once you get that done, once you do what you got to do to get reconciled in the first month, then the reconciliation will be fine going forward because the ending balance will always tie out to the beginning balance once your system is lined up. So what we need here is the ending balance then on the bank statement, which is the 109,917 for us. So I'm going to put in the 109,917. Then I want the date end. This is going to be as of the end of January. So we're doing the first bank reconciliation for the first month. Then we'll do the second month next time. Then we have the added information down here. Now, if you have these service charges or any interest that was earned, you could put those in here, and QuickBooks will basically do a transaction for you and put that into the bank reconciliation. I don't like doing that personally, because it doesn't always show up on the bank reconciliation in the same format. You know, I want to go into the bank reconciliation and check everything off one at a time, because that way I can make sure that I checked everything off and that everything reconciles. If there are items that kind of magically check themselves off, then I get confused if you know, whether they're included or not. So I would rather not do this and then just go back into the register and manually input it into the register. And that's what we'll do. I'll show you how to do that. So I just basically ignore these. It doesn't mean that we don't have service charges or possibly interest earned. It just means that I'm going to manually put them into the register rather than use their little thing here to do it. So I'm going to say save then. And we're going to have a screen then that looks something like this. So I'm going to close the hamburger here. And the main number you're kind of looking at over here is this number. This difference needs to basically go down to 0. So at the end of this, that should go down to 0. And that'll mean that you've reconciled, you've matched up everything that has cleared on the books and in the bank. So that's what we're considering. If that's anything other than 0, you can force it to reconcile. But even if that is down to like 1 or 2, you're not really sure, because that $1 or $2 that it's off by could be because there's like 5 deposits and 10 checks that aren't entered that resulted in a $2 difference. So unless you're down to the penny really, or you know, down basically to the penny, then your level of assurance goes way down if you're off by just about anything. If you're exactly on, your level of insurance is pretty good, and you should be able to get exactly on, even if you have a pretty large account, because we're just ticking and tying off the numbers. It has to match up. If the numbers are the same, they're the same. So then over here we have the statement ending balance. This of course comes from the bank statement. So there's the ending balance on the bank statement. We have the balance for us, the 25,000, and then we have basically the payments and deposits that we're going to check off. So here's the beginning balance that we have that matches up. This is the cleared balance that we have. Then we're going to be having the payments and deposits. Those will be recorded as we check them off down below. Now the default down below, this is all of our activity down here. The default is basically to have this all checked off, have the all button kind of checked off. Or you can look at it by, which is probably easier, first checking off the deposits in this format, looking at the deposits only, and then looking at the payments. And then we can go in and check them off in that format. That's what we'll do here. I'm going to go to the deposits first. So I'm just going to check the deposit item, and then I'm just going to go back and forth. And remember, I would recommend for you to go from the bank statement to the books. So I'm always going this way. I'm saying here's the 65 over here, and then I'm going over here. Here's the 65 over here. In other words, I'm not finding the 65 over here and then going over here. You could do it that way. You could go back and forth and whatnot, but your mind will get kind of messed up if you're not used to doing this for a while. And the reason I recommend going from here to the bank statement is because everything that's on from here to the books is because everything on the bank statement should be on the books. Everything on the books is not necessarily on the bank statement. So if you go this way, then you should always find the number over there. And if you can't, then you recognize you have a problem of some kind that you'll have to figure out what went wrong. So once I click them off, I'm going to right click and make them a color. I'm going to make this green because that means it's good. Green means it's good. And also note the dates here, that the date on the bank statement should always be a little bit after, you would think, than on the books. Because when I deposit something in the books, it's because I walked over to the bank and I put the deposit in the bank. And that's when I recorded it in the books, in my books, in QuickBooks. I did it quickly in QuickBooks. And then in the bank, though, it takes them a little while to process it. Now, a deposit, they should be able to process in a couple days. So you would think the deposit's going to clear the bank a couple days after the deposit's in our books, because deposits in our books we put in there right when we put it into the bank, and it takes a couple days to clear. So the date's always going to be a little bit off, but it should be pretty close with the deposits, you would think. The checks could be quite off, right? The checks could be quite off because someone could be holding on to your check for like a month or like 5 months before they cash it, and then you're like, why were you holding on the check for that long? Because it didn't clear my bank forever and whatever. So then over here we're going to say then we have the 50,000, and then we have the 50,000 over here, so that checks off. And so I'm going to go back over and make this one green. Here's the 8,438, and I go back over here. Here's the 8,438, and then I go back over here and make that green. And then here's the 13,192. And then here's the 13,192, and then I go back over here and make that green. And then there's no more here. There's none more here, but there's another one over here. So why is that one here and not on the other side? It's because this one hasn't cleared. So this one hasn't cleared. When did we put it into our books? We put it in there as of 1/28, which is pretty close to the end of the month. So it might be possible it didn't get to the bank yet. So that would be reasonable that it didn't clear. What if I'm worried about it? What am I going to do? Well, normally I'm doing the bank reconciliation not as of January 31st. They had to give me the statement, so it's got to be sometime in February. In other words, when I actually got this statement wasn't January 31st, it's sometime in February. Therefore, I can go to the banking online or something like that, and I can just say, well, it didn't clear in January, the bank. Did it clear in February? I would expect that to clear in February. If it cleared in February, then I feel okay. I'm like, that's fine. It cleared in February. I'll see it in the February bank reconciliation. On the bank statement for February, I will then see it, and I will then check it off in February when we do the bank reconciliation. All right, so that's all the deposits. Just want to point out a couple other kind of filtering options. Notice that you could, sort this information in different ways. You could filter this information. You can actually see the transactions, past January, so the February transactions. You shouldn't need to, because if they were entered in January, they wouldn't have cleared the bank. If they were entered in February, they wouldn't have cleared the bank in January. But if you want to look at the February transactions, you could do that as well. I'm going to close this back out. And you also could sort the information in different formats. You could try to sort by type or something like that, or over here sort in a different way. The date is typically going to be the default. It's going to typically sort by date. Now, these other options of sorting the information aren't as useful with the deposits. Usually there aren't as many deposits, so it's not as difficult, and all you have is basically the date. When we get to the checks, however, maybe you can sort by, if you write a lot of checks, the check number might be more helpful. Because remember, when we go to the checks and we think about when the checks cleared, they may not have cleared in an order that's similar to when we entered the checks, because people could have held on to the checks. So the dates on the checks on the bank statement may be completely, different order than the dates that we're going to put into our system. So that's one of the problems with the bank reconciliation. You're going to have to kind of think about, if you have check numbers, like if most of your transactions are with checks, then you can sort that information by check. And if your bank sorts by check too, that would be nice. You could try to line up, or find your bank, or ask your bank, or work with your bank, or find a system where the bank sorts the information in a similar fashion as you do, to make the bank reconciliation as easy as possible. Now, obviously, we're still out of balance because we haven't entered the decreases yet, but we're going to do that next time. I just want to also point out that you can leave and come back in. You don't, if I'm not reconciled, you might be concerned. Can I get up and go get some coffee or something? Will the thing, delete itself or anything like that? No, typically you can leave, and you might even leave to go enter, you might need to go back into the system and enter other transactions to reconcile and whatnot. So if you were to go out and say, okay, I'm gonna go back up to the dashboard, and then I'm gonna go back and reconcile, after lunch or something, that's fine. We're gonna pick this up next time.